I imagine that most of you heard the talk that Dr. Karch gave up at Canyon Lodge last winter sometime. There must have been 500 people there. And I was very moved by the talk. I learned a lot, but it was very distant. It was almost alien, like, oh, this happens on the moon or someplace else. And then Jim and I, my husband, we went to the first day of the mass casualty seminar at the end of September. I highly recommend you do this next September.
That's great.
Next one. This was the day that was all lectures because we weren't going to be involved as medical personnel are in their training by working on cadavers and working in operating rooms with no power and all kinds of noise and stuff going off. But it was sitting in that room with those medical professionals who are going to be responsible for getting us through a mass casualty event. I was so moved. It was just, it's incredible what Mammoth Medical Missions does. So David, daunted by the 6-minute limitation, he's going to try to tell you how they get a medical mission to a disaster site in less than 72 hours. David Page. Jess or Ralph, or have you trouble Okay, showtime.
Okay, so here's the scenario. There's a major disaster that's happened across the globe. Turkey, Egypt, Argentina, Philippines. 5,000 people dead, tens of thousands of people injured. We've got to get medical teams there. How do we do it? November 7th, 2013, and most of you probably will have heard a version of this story, but we happened to have a team of 18 people packed and ready to go with all the medical supplies and equipment that we needed to do a week's worth of surgeries in Chiapas, Mexico. As it happened, we were the only medical team in the Western Hemisphere ready to respond to this. The strongest cyclonic storm ever to make landfall on that's the eastern seaboard of the Philippines there. This was 3:57 p.m. in Mammoth Lakes. We're packing up. 2 hours later, I'm standing in line at the Vaughn's Pharmacy filling a prescription for a bottle of Advil, and I get an email on my phone from somebody from Team Rubicon saying, we need a medical team to go to the Philippines. And I thought, okay, great, next fall we probably will be able to do that. And it turned out, oh, now actually would be the time. So it took us another, you can't really see that, the formatting kind of changed, but hour 14, this is 12 hours later, we're now at LAX. We've met up with the team that morning. We've decided we're going to go. We've lost 2 of the people. We spent the entire day getting immunizations, sort of repacking, talking to the embassy, talking to the Navy, getting ready to go, spending $1,400 a piece on airline tickets. We get on a flight at 9 o'clock at night. Anybody who's ever flown over to the Philippines from LAX, it's a very long flight, and in the course of that night, while you're sleeping or playing poker, you cross the international date line. Lost an entire day right there. Hour 50, we were at the Villamore Air Base, which is the military air base on the backside of the Manila International Airport. There's Dr. Karch talking to the sub-commander of the Philippine Air Force, asking to be sent to the hardest hit area. You can see his face. But 2 hours later, hour 54, they've got a C-130 there parked for our pleasure. An hour later, we're flying over Leyte province, one of the hardest hit areas. You can see the ships of the port have landed on the beach from the 30-foot tsunami that followed. This is us an hour later, hauling our 56 bags across the airstrip to get on a helicopter. Hour 58, to go to Tanawan, basically the eye of the storm. There's us hauling our bags over the beach. There's Dr. Bourne and Mike McMahon doing one of the many portages, hauling gear out of a truck, over down power lines, into the truck again. We made it to the city hall, which had no roof. It got dark. We spent most of the night cleaning up, making operating tables out of desks. There we are, hour 72 hours after the storm hit. We're ready to start seeing these hundreds of people who are in the street. Why does it matter? Why do we need medical teams to fly halfway across the globe? Well, because these events are happening at a rate of 4 to 6 every year, massive events, and it seems, by all accounts, that the incidents are happening at an even greater rate. Typhoons, hurricanes, there was a volcano in Japan just recently, over the weekend, I'm sure you guys heard about that. Big earthquakes, there's a big one in Iran from last year. What's the rush? Why do we have to get there so fast? Because most people die in the first 72 hours. Most of the casualties occur in the first 3 days. And most teams don't arrive till day 7, day 8. And by that time, you're talking about a whole second wave. You're talking about disease, you're talking about crime. But the first traumatic event is the first 3 days. Gotta get there. Will we be able to do it again? Will we get lucky? Will we be packed up and ready to go the next time? I don't know, probably not. So is there anything we can do? Well, the best thing to do is to be ready. The search and rescue guys are probably better than us, but we're doing our best. We now have, thanks to the support of a community like this and donors from across the country, we've got bags ready for 24 people. We've got medical supplies. We have a little headquarters here in Mammoth. We're almost packed as if we were leaving tomorrow. We've got key partnerships built. Airlink is a company that will fly us anywhere in the world in the case of a disaster for free. The World Health Organization recognizes us. Rotary is working with us to do training. Palantir is doing data assessment on the ground. Direct Relief provides us with all our medical supplies for free. We're starting to do at least one training a year. We're trying to take this on the road so we get better and better at being able to work with very little. We want to expand our routine medical missions so that we get good at moving teams from here to there logistically and working in austere environments. The biggest thing is that we need to build and scale our volunteer database, and that's why I asked that question of Jeff, because we probably have 50 people that we've worked with, but are they all going to be ready at a moment's notice, or are they going to be sleeping or eating or on call or working for the hospital? So we need to go from 50 to 1,000 so that we can at any moment get a small team of 20 people to get to where we need to go. That's how it'll work.
Because this came up at the mass casualty seminar day 1. David, could you compare what Mammoth Medical Missions does with what Doctors Without Borders do? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Doctors Without Borders, we've been talking to them, and ideally that would be a partner organization for us as well. They're a huge organization, international. Obviously, they speak French mostly, and that's one big difference. We speak English. But in the case of the Philippines, Doctors Without Borders, the very first advanced teams came at about day 10. Within a month, they were set up where we had set up. They came in and plugged into the location that we'd established. And then they were there for 3 months. But when they come in, they bring pallets of gear, they're bringing trucks, they require all kinds of security forces, they're bringing inflatable hospitals. So it's really, it's kind of a different niche, it's a different game that we're aiming for, which is much closer to what search and rescue would do, except with doctors and surgeons, where the ideal is that we're going to go in and be able to work without power and be a bridge to those larger organizations.
What was the biggest logistical problem you had in the Philippines?
$1,900 a ticket.
That's an impossible question to answer. Every single thing was a major obstacle. Team dynamics was a big one, and that's something we've done a lot of work on in the last 8 months, working on how to organize a team of 24 civilians who aren't used to being told what to do and how to get from here to there. You know, it's hard to shift from tourist mode into military style platoon. And that, I think, is something we're starting to work on in our routine mission. And we're getting a lot better at actually keeping track of all our bags and not losing things and not having people wander off.
We just came off of a storm of earthquakes here last week, and so if something larger, more catastrophic would happen here, it'd be very easy and selfish to just grab your family and head out, but how could we respond best to a major catastrophe at home?
Well, I mean, I think the first answer is be prepared beforehand, obviously. You know, the best thing is to have, and we saw this in the Philippines, that there were some people who were prepared and some people who were not at all. And you know, imagine if your house gets leveled and whatever incident might happen, what do you have in the basement that you can live on? Do you know where your gas shutoff is? Do you have a supply of food? And if, as a whole community, if we can support ourselves in the time that it takes the Red Cross and the bigger organizations to get here, that's the best we can do. And other than that, from a medical standpoint, from a response standpoint, you know, all the agencies, I think we're starting, and we all need to get better and better at working together so that we can respond to our own first while we're waiting for an influx of personnel and supplies.
Other questions, sir?
Yeah, your one chart implied after 72 hours that there's basically mayhem on site. One of your abbreviations with GSW, gunshot wounds, I think.
Right.
So the two questions. One is your personal safety. How are you protected given that things are basically out of control? And number two, how do you volunteer?
Great. The first question, the one about security, was a big one, and it's part of that group dynamics thing. How do you keep the team calm and feeling safe? What we did in the Philippines, one of our first calls the night before was to the U.S. Navy, so they knew where we were, they knew we were going in, but we were way ahead of them. We were way ahead of the Marines. The second was to the Philippines Embassy in Washington, D.C., and they put us together with people on the ground. So we had the whole joint forces of the Philippines Army and Navy with us, and so we had security with us. We had a whole platoon of military guys with us. So, I don't think we would have left Manila if we hadn't had that assured. We definitely, every once in a while, we have people volunteer to come with us as security people. I think internationally that's a tricky thing. I think we need to rely on the locals to provide security. And ironically, as we were there, and because we got in so early, that mayhem hadn't occurred yet. And we were, I think, at least anecdotally, it's not necessarily scientific, but there's been more and more research that's shown that, in fact, societal cohesion gets better over the first 72 hours because people pull together and work together and don't rob and steal. It's after that, once that they've found that the municipal structures have fallen apart, that's where you start to see crime. So if you can get in before that and help the municipal structure establish itself and help them provide care for their citizens, then it has sort of it has a magnifying effect out onto the population. How do you volunteer? We have on our website, if you're not going to donate, there's /volunteer, and we have a volunteer form. And one of our big projects that we've been working on over the last few months, and it's a big project that's ongoing. As soon as we got back, a bunch of these big organizations said, you guys are the ones to deal with personnel, to deal with getting as many medical people trained and in a database that we can all use, because no such thing exists. There is no database of medical volunteers that exists in the world. So please sign up, and then you'll go into our database, and that's becoming more and more. We're building it out so that we can search it. Who speaks Spanish, who's an RN, who's done time in Afghanistan, who's where, so that ideally the dream would be down the road, we'd have 10,000 people all over the globe, that when we send out that bat signal, we can get teams to show up anywhere, even in Monroe County. Catherine?
That training that I attended was at the same time the most exhilarating and the most humbling thing I have ever done in my entire career. Ever. Let's train harder.
Let's train harder, I agree.
Selfishly, is there some kind of a emergency training course you can give all of us in Mammoth that we can actually be a cohesive group?
I think it's a neat idea. This year's mass casualty seminar was kind of a step above what Mike had been doing for the last couple of years, mostly training firefighters, paramedics, and hospital staff, and we started to include some civilians like myself in that, and I think the response was kind of overwhelmingly positive, and it sounds like we've got some support to try and do more of those, and my goal will always be to incorporate a certain percentage of normal everyday people, because in the response in the Philippines, that was a big part of it was local people responding who maybe didn't have experience.
Yeah. There's an organization within this town, about 50 or 60 of your neighbors are banded together as CERT members. And there's a meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock for information if you wish to find out about how to take some of this training to make yourself one less casualty, one less victim, and to give you some training to extend our small fire department, our small police department, our small mental health department if they get overwhelmed by something that happens. So tomorrow night, 6 o'clock at the Best Western is an information meeting if you're interested in CERT.
That's a great thing, and everybody should do that. And that's one of the, we're a tiny little niche of medical teams, and obviously there are all these other agencies and who have their own niches, and the trick is to get us all to collaborate and to have those systems in place so that when something happens, we're all good to go.